From the Whiskey 61 Lounge inside the Bank Plus studio.
You are listening to
Mississippi's #1 sports talk show, The Out of Bounds Show with Bo Bounds. Streaming worldwide live on the Out of Bounds radio app and on your radio at ESPN 105.9. The Zone.
Good morning. Welcome in. Out of Bounds 105.9 The Zone, brought to you by the Great Steaks. Awesome selection of bourbon and wine at Kessler Prime in the Renaissance. Visit KesslerPrime.com to make a reservation. We're live in the Bank Plus studio. Our guests join us on the Modelo guest line. We welcome in Steve Robertson, Hail State Insider, the Boneyard Podcast, genespage.com. Steve, here we are, postseason baseball, and Mississippi State coming off being embarrassed at the SEC tournament. How do you think the coaching staff and team have worked through that since their disappointing, getting run ruled in both games in Hoover, Steve?
Well, Lemonis gave the team a couple days off, and probably a good thing. Let them get away from the game a little bit and kind of reconnect with friends and family. And then they were right back at it, ready to work. They knew they were going to be playing postseason baseball. They knew they were going to be hosting a regional, and so take a couple days away, kind of refresh and refocus, and you get back at it. But, and I'll be honest with you, too. It's one of those things, I think it's a valuable lesson. I think in many respects that, if you show up at Hoover thinking you got it made, you're going to run into a team that's got something to prove. And I think that's what happened in both situations. I really think State's focus was not probably as strong as it should have been, and it showed on the scoreboard. And I think Florida and Tennessee both were playing for something and did a great job, and State, took the brunt of that.
All right. Well, you never know week to week. I mean, all of us have been doing this thing. You especially have gone on every road trip, I think, since February. But and some weekends the teams look good. Some weekends they don't. What direction do you think Lemonis and Foxhall will go on Friday as far as on the bump, on the mound against Samford, Steve?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I actually talked about that on my own show. I mean, there's a lot of options here, but I think, when you begin to break things down and we really look at matchups, if you look at what Samford did in the SoCon tournament, they started one switch hitter and 8 right-handers. And so ordinarily you would think, well, let's throw off. Okay, well, let's throw Houston Harding. Well, Houston Harding pitched against them back on March 16th. Maybe you go that direction, maybe you don't, because they've already seen him. Maybe they have a different game plan. Now they understand, hey, you know what? Maybe we sit soft with this guy because he has that plus changeup, And so if you're going to stay left-handed, do you throw McLeod? Or I think you come back with a right-hander. I know you shake things up. You got to win game one. But, perhaps because they're a right-dominated lineup, maybe you bring a right-hander. And one of the things, too, I think is interesting to note, I learned in my own research, Samford, VCU, Campbell, all among the top 15 in runs scored nationally this year. And then you got a couple teams right there, hit more home runs in Mississippi State, scored more runs in Arkansas. So you can't just go out there and treat this like a midweek game and then just hope for the best. You got to go play to win.
So you wouldn't be surprised if Will Bednar threw on Friday afternoon?
I absolutely would not be surprised. I don't know if I would call it a probability, but I think it's certainly a possibility, especially when you look at the fact that Samford is a very offensive club and they're dominated by the right-hand hitter. I think it's just one of those things you look at and say, we got to get a W, and we probably need to send the guy that's the best matchup out there. And some could argue, well, it's one of the young guys. But, do you want to trot Cade Smith out there in front of, 10, 12,000 people out there and say, okay, kid,
no,
get us a win in the NCAA regional? And he's going to be a big part of things moving forward. I just don't know if that's the right move at this point. So, yeah, I think there is a real possibility you see Will Bednar on the bump Friday afternoon.
You can watch the show on Facebook. Search the Out of Bounds Show. So give me your it sounds like McLeod's not going to go just because of what you referenced with the right-handed hitters. So if you had to put $100 on it, you would start with Bednar and then go probably with another right-hander as far as odds on Friday afternoon, right?
Yeah, I would think so. And a lot of it's going to depend on, how much your starter gets you. But, yeah, if I had to call it today, I think you absolutely have to throw a right-hander. And if you're going to throw a right-hander, who's your best one? It's Will Bednar. He's got – you need to win those first two ball games. You know what I'm saying? You've got to get into the winner's bracket and stay in the winner's bracket. And, it's about matchups. And I think, that's probably the best thing to do. But now we say that, and who knows, Friday, I mean, you may go out there and have Jackson Fristow starting. It's just, Chris has some options there. And, there's probably, some criticism that you can make no matter what decision's made.
Oh, no doubt. Bianco and Lemonis both have their hands full. Everybody's on pins and needles on the edge of their seat on this thing. Steve Robertson on the Modelo guest line. The lineup has been Jekyll and Hyde, Steve. What needs to happen this weekend for Mississippi State to get into a super other than obviously outscore their opponent throughout the weekend? What needs to happen at the plate for MSU this weekend?
Well, they got to get some production of guys like Callum Clark and Lane Forsythe. They've got to, at the very least, be guys who can go up there and set the table for the top of the order and kind of move things along. And Callum Clark is a guy that's been really, really strong down the stretch, and he is a power bat. And so you make a mistake with him, he's kind of out there hiding in the reeds a little bit. So it's like, oh, this guy's down the order. You make a mistake to him, he's going to put you on SportsCenter. He's that caliber of a hitter. So I think, State's got to have some length in the lineup. I think we pretty much know what they can do 1 through 6. I think once you get through Scotty DeBrule and them, you kind of hold your breath at times because you think, oh, this is going to be a dead inning. And so you got to get that bottom third of the order producing. You got to get them moving the order around, at least kind of setting some things up where maybe Rowdy and TA are able to hit against a pitcher that's in the stretch, which I think opens up things offensively for you. But, they've got to get some length in the lineup for sure.
And how do you think they'll react? I mean, they've been through several weekends with a packed house. How do you think this team – a lot of this is new for several players. How do you think they'll react to it's a regional and it's a packed Duty Noble Field?
Well, I think, Super Bulldog weekend helps a lot. The Arkansas weekend was really the first opportunity many of those guys had to go play in front of a pretty big crowd. And then you got people kind of hanging from the rafters for Super Bulldog weekend. I think that prepares you a little bit, whereas, if you're used to playing in front of 500-600 people and you show up down here and, there's 500 people in the right field lounge that know your name and your mom's name and your girlfriend's name and your high school pet that died and that sort of stuff. I mean, it's a very intriguing experience to say the least, but I think they're going to bounce back, and I think having some time away is probably good. But this is a proud program with a lot of players that have played baseball for a long time, and they understand you're going to have some bad days. But they also understand, too, when you go out there and play like they did at Hoover, you got to come out with an edge, and I suspect they will. I really think that Mississippi State's going to bounce back and play well this weekend.
I got a minute and a half. Who's the worst matchup for them this weekend out of the three teams?
VCU, I think, really, to be honest with you. I think that's the one team, if you look at it and say, okay, who could win this regional that's not named Mississippi State? I think it's VCU. They've won, 21 games in a row. If you look at their pitching rotation, they've had some guys put up some pretty big numbers. And it's been kind of spread around. They hadn't had that one maybe dominant guy that's kind of carried them. I mean, it's been a different hero every night. And this is a team, too, that has grown accustomed to winning. And so that's the one team I look at and say, you know what, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised to see them come up here and play in a regional final. I think they're a very, very talented team.
If they go Bednar, I've got about 30 seconds. They go Bednar. Let's say they go McLeod on Saturday. Who do you think could be the third starter this weekend, Steve?
Well, I think if you see Sanford – in that third game, I think you got to go with the right-hand guy again. But
okay,
then maybe you go Fristow and bring back Hootie again in the second half. We'll see how it progresses. But no easy decisions. Maybe even Brandon Smith gets another run at it. We'll see.
All right, Steve Robertson, the Boneyard Podcast on the Modelo guest line. Thanks, Steve. You're listening to the Out of Bounds Show, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. Brought to you by the great steaks at Kessler Prime and the Renaissance. Visit KesslerPrime.com. They've also got private dining rooms. That's KesslerPrime.com. Jeff Duncan will join us on Arch Manning at 8:30. He dropped a fantastic article yesterday. We'll be back in a sec.